now looking back, I feel for me, the benefit was to exercise that creative muscle and to kind of plant your flag and say, this is what I do, and that's a whole other thing because you have all these people, the general public coming through and you hear some of them say like, I don't like that. That's not for me. And you're like, oh, cool. So this time around, I loved the idea of just being true to what I want to do, not having that creative ceiling. It's great for your portfolio, I think. And you do get that creative satisfaction out of it if it all goes the way you want it to go.
All right. I'm Rebecca Hay, and I've built a successful interior design business by trial and error, podcasts, online courses, and so many freaking books. Over the last decade, I've grown from an insecure student to having false starts to careers, and now I'm finally in the place where I want to be. Throughout my journey, it's been pretty obvious that I'm passionate about business and helping other entrepreneurs do the same. Each week, I'll share tangible takeaways from my own experience and the experiences of other badass women to help you build your confidence and change your business. Hey, it's Rebecca, and you are listening to Resilient by Design. Today's podcast interview is with Jennifer Muirhead. She is one of our Designers Room members, our POP alumni, and I happened to spend time with her last fall at High Point Market. She is an incredibly talented designer and also a very generous member of our designer community. Today's episode, I'm excited to share with you because we are diving into all things what it means to design a show house. I know so many designers, including myself, would love the opportunity to design part of a room or an entire show house. And so today, Jennifer walks you through exactly her experience having done this now more than once, how she even got into it, what it's like, all the nitty-gritty details. I ask a ton of questions because really, I didn't know anything about this before. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode with Jennifer. She is very talented, as I mentioned, but her design business was established in 2012, back in Los Angeles. She was originally working on the West Coast. She studied UCLA architecture and interior design, and prior to that, she had been an editor at InStyle magazine and spent several years in television production. So cool. This is something I've never talked about with her, so I'm totally going to have another conversation about that. She graduated Boston University, and she now lives in the historic neighborhood of Morristown, New Jersey. She recently moved her entire family and business from the West Coast to the East Coast, and we talk a little bit about that experience here as well. I hope you really enjoy this episode with Jennifer. Welcome to the podcast again. I'm so excited to have you here. Today we have Jennifer Muirhead. We have had you on the podcast before though, so I'm excited to dive in with you one-on-one because last time we had you on a panel. Without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. So I'm Jennifer Muirhead. My company's Jennifer Muirhead Interiors, and I'm based in the Morristown area of New Jersey. I'm mostly residential. Interior designer. Started my business in California and now I'm here. So it's been a crisscross journey.
Oh yeah. It's so funny. I forgot that. I feel like that would have been a great episode in and of itself, moving across country.
Yeah. Well, the show, which we'll dive into this, but the first show house I did kind of played into all of that. So because it was right after I moved here. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, so many things I want to talk about today. I mean, the whole idea of having you on today is I really want to dive into this idea of the show homes, because a lot of designers have sort of said tell me, I see designers doing it. What is that all about? How do you get into it? And I see that you're doing it. And so I think it's just going to be such a great conversation. But I also want to know about the whole idea of moving country, because you had a design business in California, and then you've moved all the way to, I want to say New Jersey. Which is literally coast to coast.
Literally. Yes.
So let's just give that a hot minute, just because I feel like that's an important part of your story.
It is. Yeah. So I started my business in Los Angeles in 2012, straight out of design, straight out of it. Never even worked for anyone else. So, it takes a long time. You have to build up your vendor list and all of that. And you have to learn all the things, which Back then, there weren't like a ton of podcasts like there are now. So yeah, at the very end of 2018, we had wanted to move back because our family is here. I have an only child, so I wanted her to have all her cousins, blah, blah, blah. So we did it. We moved. And that meant completely starting over in essentially 2019. So,
ooh, perfect timing, right?
yeah, that first show house I did actually played an interesting role in getting my business kind of started up again, but not in the way you might think. Yeah, it's been
Did you still have projects in California that you were working on, like after you moved?
Not really. I knew we were going to move, so I kind of wound everything down there. And then there were like a couple little things that people were like, oh, hey, remember this room? Can you get me a rug? And I was like, sure. But I really wanted to like cut the cord there because I knew I didn't want to be doing that anymore cross country.
And I would imagine too, like the design aesthetic,
Also,
it would be a little bit different, right?
very different. But I find that I still bring some of that California aesthetic and kind of like mix it in because I like everything mixed up, but it's not totally
Would you say that when you were in California, you were doing more, like were your designs leaning more towards that? Or was it that you found the people that wanted your signature style? Because your signature style, by the way, I love it. I'm like, if I could hire a designer, I'd probably hire Jennifer Muirhead.
Wow.
Did you find clients that were attracted to your style in California? Or was it more of like you kind of took on that kind of coastal vibe?
Right. It's an interesting question. If I'm being honest, I found myself feeling a little stuck in what people were asking. I think at that point in my career, I was just giving them what they wanted. And I would try to slide in. I'd be like, but look at this beautiful English roll armchair. And then, so I could feel that I was like trying to inject it a little bit. But I mostly, if I'm being honest, I was kind of like giving them what they wanted. So this was definitely my chance to plant my flag and lean into that kind of traditional thing that I do now.
The reason I ask that is because it's something that I think about a lot, and it's something like I feel like my experience was so similar to yours in that I haven't moved cities, but I mean, I still feel like Toronto doesn't really want what I want to do, if I'm being completely honest. And so same thing as you, like I felt that I kept introducing like, well, what about, this William Birch style sofa? Like, what about this? Yeah. And you get the odd client who was like, oh, okay. And more often than not, it was actually my older clients that were like retired that valued those things. But it is interesting when you're starting your business. And I think this is going to relate to doing the show homes, right? When you're doing a show home, I imagine you want to have a bit more of a signature style, right? This is your opportunity to shine. And so when you're starting, sometimes you're learning and you just do the design that you think people want. At least that's what I did. And I assumed sometimes that I didn't always push the boundary as much as maybe I could have because I was maybe insecure and I wasn't really, I wasn't necessarily confident that I could pull off what I really wanted to do. And so it seemed easier just to do what I was seeing everywhere else. I don't know if that was your experience, but I think it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely almost exactly how I felt. And, I think that also like parallels your life and like how you feel in your 20s and your 30s and then 40 plus.
Yeah.
It's like
in your 40s, you're like, I don't give up, bleep. I'm going to do what I want.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So you move across the country. Now you're in New Jersey and you get to start to really design things the way that you want, and you start picking up clients.
Right. The way it went for me was I started with my house because, again, you have to start over completely. Like you have to fill your stable with amazing vendors all over again. So it's a little bit of an experiment. So it started in my house and, I would never feel comfortable taking on a client until I felt really good about vendors. That was sort of like my main goal for the first year. And then this opportunity came up for this show house, which is, I guess, even though, sidebar, I grew up in New Jersey, I never went to this show house, but apparently it's been going on for years and years and years. And anyway, it happened to be, they do it like every 2-3 years. So it happened to be, they were putting this one on in May of 2020. And so I was like, I'm going to just submit. I'm just going to submit my design. So this particular show house, they put out like this PR blast, like if you want to submit, come to do the walkthrough of this home. And for this particular one, So the one I'm doing now, it's the same organization that puts it on. It's a charity for our local hospital. And they choose a different mansion every couple of years. So even though it's the same organization, you have a completely different home, different gardens, because they get the landscape people involved as well. So it's massive. So you go and you walk through the space and you kind of figure out which one would I like to do. You take your photos, whatever, you take your measurements, and you leave, and they give you like a month to put your design together, and you submit it to this committee, this design committee. And then they choose you for that room. Or in my case, they were like, we love this design, but can you do this room, different room. So it's a little,
You're like, okay, so I just spent all that time designing one room for free.
But you're
and
like,
now,
right. But, I was like, yes, no problem. I'll do it, whatever. And it just so happened the room that they asked me to do was like, I picked a really small room because I was like, I don't know, I don't know what I'm committing to. And they gave me this other room that I really, really wanted. So it was kind of serendipitous.
oh my gosh, so cool.
Yeah. So then they pick you go to their like kickoff event. And this was like February of 2020. And then it all just went downhill.
Right.
So it still happened, but it happened in September. So it just was this weird delay of like, it actually worked out really well because we had a lot more time to do it. It's the opposite of the experience that I'm having now.
Right.
So normally it would be like October with doors opening May 1st. And this was October, doors opening September 1st. So we had like all summer to get our act together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just sort of go back for a second. So show house, I don't even know if we have these in Canada. Like we kind of do. So there's something at least we do. Do you know? You probably know more than I do. There's like the Princess Margaret.
Okay.
So in Toronto, there's something called, it's like a lottery. I don't know if that's how yours works. There's a lottery. It's for charity. So there's the Princess Margaret. Princess Margaret is a hospital in Toronto. They do the show home. It's like a couple times a year at least. But typically the way I've seen it done here, and it's always the one same like celebrity designer, Brian Gluckstein in Toronto. And they do other houses. They'll do cottage country. And then essentially it's a lottery. People buy tickets. Someone wins the house and all the money goes to the hospital, to the foundation. So, and they're usually big, except for some of the cottages are small, but they're usually big, impressive mansions, as you call them, like gorgeous. But what I've seen here is it's like one designer does the entire house.
That's so interesting.
It sounds like yours is like you do a room, like each designer does a room, which is way less daunting and less of a commitment. I love that idea.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this one this year is 29 design firms. So
wow,
it's so many people. It's a lot of moving parts. And it's the Women's Association of Morristown Medical Center. And so it's the same group of women who put it on every time. And they are like a well-oiled machine, but there's only so much you can, things happen, as we know, on regular design projects. So
yeah,
like 30 design firms, it's chaotic. Yeah.
So talk to me about the process. So essentially you knew about the show home that they would do. So you were tapped in and saw when they did a press release. And so there's a process and you submit it. Is that typical of show homes across the US?
Yes.
Is that the process?
As far as I know, I've seen, because there are others that I'm curious about, it seems to be the same process. Like they put out their like, okay, it's time, submit your entries are due by such and such date. And then you go to their website and you fill in the forms and they tell you how to submit your presentation. This one is local to me. So I am able to just like drive it over there.
Yeah, that's super cool. Okay. So then you get accepted.
Yes.
So who pays for all this stuff?
Okay. So this was all new to me. This was like, I was really learning everything on this first one. So for the first one that I did, I think somebody owned the home, but they weren't going to move into it. So all the expense was on the designer. With that knowledge, you're sort of saying, okay, well, I'd rather do this kind of room versus that kind of room, because the first room I did is a bedroom. And it's like, okay, I'm going to fill it with furniture that I can take with me when I leave if I need to. Or this particular show house, they allow you to sell what's in your room. So there is this sort of opportunity to kind of make your money back in theory. But when it comes to the labor, people who are coming in to do the painting and the wallpaper and the upholstery and all of that, sometimes people will donate their services and sometimes they will not. So that's the big I would say overarching theme here is that you kind of have to, you should expect to invest money and time.
That's what I figured. I was super curious about that. Like, obviously, I imagine that you're donating your skills and time to design it and coming up with everything. But I always wondered about like all those materials and products, which when I see pictures in magazines and online, like these are high end designs. These are not like IKEA, right? Like we're talking $300 a yard fabric plus
Yeah.
custom upholstery, as you mentioned, probably wallpaper. Like these are not inexpensive rooms to design.
No. And, not to skip ahead to the one that I'm working on now, I did a bathroom. Fortunately, I partnered with a company who donated all the tile and the marble and a company that donated the plumbing fixtures. And all of my vendors that I used this time around, they did everything for free. So for me, out of pocket, there were a few things out of pocket, but I find that if you just ask the vendors, so, the wallpaper that I use, I just asked them, I said, look, I'm doing a show house. It's for charity. Can you help me out? And they gave me an even steeper discount than they normally would. So you just have to ask. But I know some people who had everything donated. So it kind of, you have to think about how much you would like to invest to make your vision come to life versus all your vendors' visions, if that makes sense.
Right. Because they might say, we really want you to feature this product, right? Like I recognize you wanted a soapstone counter, but we would really prefer to push this marble, what have you, new product because people are going to see it. And so there's probably that balance of this is what I want to design, but this is what's free. Did you have to make any sort of concessions or changes as a result?
This time around, it worked out, but at first I was a little bit concerned because this particular mansion, there is a homeowner who is moving in and she is a designer actually. So she wanted to weigh in on anything that was going in permanently, such as tile and plumbing fixtures. So
wow.
Luckily, I really lucked out. The vendors who donated, I definitely searched it to make sure I wanted to work with them first, but they had beautiful products and it worked out really well. And she liked what I presented. So we're sort of on the same page style wise. So that was good. I didn't feel like I had to make any concessions in that department, really.
That's amazing. Because it makes me think about designing for television. When you're like, I have this vision, but then the production companies partnered with this tile place and you partnered with this, what have you. And so you're limited to your choices. And so sometimes you can't be as creative as you want. This sounds way better.
We did have an incident with like this initial wallpaper that I wanted to use and that the homeowner loved and was like, great, let's do it. I'm going to keep it because at the end of the show house, you have to remove a lot of it.
Even the wallpaper?
Yeah, sometimes.
Oh, no.
Unless they come in and they say, I love this, let's keep it. So she had initially approved this wallpaper that company I called and they said, I'm sorry, we can't give you a discount. And P.S. it's $200 per repeat. And I was like, I have a better idea. Let's use some wallpaper. So it worked out and I actually am even happier with what I ended up using, but it's crazy.
Yeah. That's wild.
It's
so
wild.
Is the onus on the individual designer to find those partnerships, or is it the organization that sort of coordinates the whole show house that's like, hey, we've got this marble partner on board? How does that work?
I think it's kind of a split. So for this particular show house this time around, I actually wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to submit a design. And I didn't submit a design back in October because I know the time commitment and the cost and all of that. But they actually asked me in January, I guess they had like a dropout in this particular bathroom. And they came to me and said, will you do a bathroom? We have these partnerships lined up. But I have to fill in the rest.
Right.
Which is, I think for the most part, people were pretty, and then I had people calling me saying, hey, I heard you're working on this. I heard from so-and-so you're working on this. Would you like us to supply the lumber? Like, great, sure.
Awesome.
It sounds daunting. I think people want their product on display because it's good. It's good for them. It's really good for them.
Yeah. One thing I've learned, in the last handful of years doing some partnership deals and small influencer gigs is that most companies would love to give product in exchange for awareness, in exchange for publicity, because the cost of the product to them is so minimal compared to a paid campaign or an ad in a magazine that, a faucet, they would much prefer to donate a faucet or the plumbing fixtures, because then the photographs are going to go everywhere. Everyone's going to see that it's, let's say, a Moen faucet. And the exposure is like the return on that investment as a product, like someone who has a product company, it, to me is really, really good. So I can imagine that a lot of people would want to partner. Do these product companies, let's say they donate wallpaper, plumbing, tile, what have you, fabric, do they get recognition?
Yes, they do. In my particular space, I have included them in, I have like a little write-up and I have their business cards, and we had a media day the other day. We try to talk them up as much as possible. And then we also, everyone, for this one, most of them, you get this like take-home journal that has information about every room. So I think they estimate something, I could be wrong, 40,000 people will come through and take home this book.
I'm sorry. What? Yeah. 40,000 people walk through this house? Where are these people coming from?
I don't know. They're coming from all over. I mean, that's pretty good. So I have all of my vendors and everybody mentioned in there. So if people like it, they have the information, and those people will also usually take out ads. And then when you go to the show house, there's a little cafe and their logos are everywhere. And so there is a lot of exposure for that.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I can see the benefit. And how long is this show house open to the public?
This one runs the entire month of May.
For a month. And I assume they make money because people buy tickets. Is that how it works?
People buy tickets. And then if you are selling product out of your space, there's a certain percentage of the product that goes back to the hospital as well. They have raffles, they do everything they can.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Do you know how much money they typically fundraise from one show house?
Oh gosh. I want to say that the last one, I think they made $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah, it's significant. It's the hospital. It's a really great hospital. They always pick a different part of it to focus on every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's the hospital's largest fundraiser. So
fantastic. I mean, what a great idea. Like what a way better way to get money than just planning like a fundraising event, Yeah. Like you get to showcase local talent. What a great thing to do. I'm so curious. So when the show home is done, like this is someone's actual house. Like they own this house. It's not, so up here, nobody owns it. It's like usually a new build or a total gut reno, and then it's given away and everything in it. I think actually, I might be speaking out of turn. I don't know. I assume that everything in it, because all the furniture is specific, goes to that winner who gets the house. But then you end up having to take everything out. Well, not the plumbing probably, but anything else.
Right. Yeah. So again, for this particular home, because somebody is going to live there, we have the option to say, if we want to use white dove on the trim, we don't have to repaint or whatever. Or, all the flooring has to be stained this color, or it has to be returned back. So you kind of have the option to work with what they want it returned to, or hope that they don't want to change it back. If not, you have to strip down. I mean, it's a lot.
So who pays for that?
Me, the designer.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's probably that juggle.
Unless your vendor will donate their time and labor to you, which this time around, for the most part, that's what happened for me. But the first time around, that was not the case.
I would imagine the more of these you do, then you have those partners that they want to do it with you. The first time it might be a little bit more challenging to get that on board because you've not done it and maybe you don't have those relationships yet, especially for you just moved back.
Yeah, that experience that really kicked off what I'm doing now, but not in the way that I thought it would. I learned so much. I met so many other designers, so many vendors. So that part of it was really invaluable to me. It wasn't so much about getting clients. I would say that's not really what it's about at all. It was much more about becoming entrenched in this community and starting to build those relationships.
All right, designers, if you have been looking for a go-to source, a go-to supplier who will allow you the creative freedom to design your own custom art area rugs for your clients, I have the vendor for you. Studio 321B has been my go-to source for years for literally every single interior design project we do. They have decades of experience and area rug knowledge. Anthony, the founder, is my go-to. You need to ask for him because he will get you sorted to help you design area rugs that are done at a very fair price. In only 90 days, you can have the area rug of your client's dreams. Go find out more. Run to their site, studio321b.com, or check them out on Instagram at studio321b.
This is a lot of work, potentially a lot of money invested. And let's not forget, this is time away from paying clients, right? Or marketing and going out and getting projects. And so what is the benefit? Like, why would a designer do it other than potentially like ego, like, yay, I got to say I did a show house. Look at it, it's so beautiful. I mean, I'm assuming there's a little bit more creativity, like you don't have a client in theory as much. So you get to really exercise your creativity and show people what you're capable of. Was that part of it for you?
That's what it was for me this time around. The first time around, I thought that it would be about getting clients and, oh my gosh, I'm going to have so many clients after this, and that really wasn't the case. Now looking back, I feel for me, the benefit was to exercise that creative muscle and to kind of plant your flag and say, this is what I do, and that's a whole other thing because you have all these people, the general public coming through, and you hear some of them say like, I don't like that. That's not for me. And you're like, oh, thank you. Thanks for coming. Cool. So it's a weird thing to kind of hear it happen in real time. But for me, this time around, I loved the idea of just being true to what I want to do, not having, within reason, not having that creative ceiling. But also, I just, it's great for your portfolio, I think. And you do get that creative satisfaction out of it if it all goes the way you want it to go. The second tier of that is continuing to build relationships with vendors. I thought I knew like everybody around here because it's not that big of an area. But I met this person who does like lime washing, Venetian plaster. I didn't have that before, and now I do. So you're continuing to grow your network and your portfolio. I would look at it that way.
Absolutely. That's super cool. I would be curious to know, you said it didn't help you get clients, but would you say it's still a good marketing asset to have?
Yes, if you're clear on that. So what happened the first time around, I got a bunch of consultations. I was like, this is great. But it wasn't my ICA, not my ideal client, right? But you have to live through that to learn that. So yes, you're getting out there. People are seeing your work. Your name is getting out there. One thing that I did, which actually you recommended to me way back then in one of your designer room Zoom calls that you used to have, I got people's email addresses and I now have a newsletter. So I did a little gave away the little Joe Malone candle that I featured in the room. If you want to win, put your email address, sign up. And so there are just little things you can do like that you can get clients or get in front of more eyeballs.
Amazing. I'm so glad you took my advice. It's so amazing. I talk about it all the time. I haven't talked about it recently. It's a good point. I should bring that back to designer's room. Let's talk about some of these basic marketing tools, but getting people's email address is so paramount because you're right in front of them. Even if they aren't the ones who hire you, you're on their radar when their friend says something or when they're out and they meet someone new who's talking about needing a decorator or designer. There's this girl, she did a show home. I get her emails. She's great. You should connect with her.
Yeah. So to answer your original question, it was like a flurry of consultations and then maybe one or two little projects that I actually got out of it, because I actually think the clients who I work with now, I don't know that I didn't find them that way. I don't know that they would be the people walking through. So it's interesting, but I do still feel like you just become part of the community in a deeper way.
So cool.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think it's worthy to note that it's not when it comes to marketing, this is what I've seen, is it's never a direct sell. With a luxury service like what we do, and it's a service, there's so many factors before someone actually hires you. And so it's pretty rare that someone's going to meet you at a home show, walk through your show house and is like, boom. Not to say it won't happen, because it will happen.
Yeah.
But it's more about, I see it as brand awareness. So you're talking about being in the community, but essentially that's brand awareness. It's like top of the funnel. Like, who am I? And in a lot of ways, I think doing a show house sounds to me way more beneficial than getting a cover on a magazine, because those national magazines are really great for like pump and show and look at me, I've been featured. And yes, you put the logo on your website, but someone in, I don't know, Nashville is maybe not going to call to hire you because you're not in their geographic location. Whereas this is getting the word out like in this radius that you probably would love to serve. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. Yeah. What about the photography? Like, how does that work? Do you pay and take your own pictures, or do they have a professional photographer come in?
So for this particular one, they do have their person who comes in and takes photos for their website and for them to have in perpetuity, whatever. And you have the option to buy those from him, or you can bring in your own photographer. So I brought in my own only because, well, I love my photographer. She's amazing. And I think her work is beautiful, and a good photographer, as you know, is like priceless. So I wanted her to do it. I wanted to see it through her eye. And also I don't like when like the white balance doesn't match. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when
you're such a creative. Yes. I know what you're talking about.
If you're viewing the whole portfolio and you're like, why does this look weird? This looks different. Anyway. Yeah. So I brought in my own, and that was my own expense, but I'm happy to do that because I think photography is everything for us.
And then once you've designed it, everything's like moved in, styled to perfection, you photograph it. Can you share those photos immediately, or is there kind of a waiting period? What's that like?
That I'm not sure how to handle that, because I try not to share anything, or not too much, but we just had this media day the other day which is another great thing. I assume they do this with most show houses, where you as a designer are there and you're hosting just editor after editor. People are coming in, and that's amazing too. Those people are taking photos and they're sharing it immediately. So it's not the same as being there and experiencing it, of course. And it's not going to be the same as, my photographer's beautiful work is going to look different than their iPhone. I don't think that deters people from coming to see it. I really don't. I think it gets people excited, because I love to go to other people's show houses and I see, Kips Bay, they're posting everything. I'm like, I still want to go.
True. Good point. Yeah.
They're not, they kind of will say to you leading up to it, don't share too much, but
I mean, sneak peeks, you want to tease people to get them to, because it is a fundraiser. And so if people don't come to the house, then they don't make money. Right. Or I'm sure there's other ways, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
So then could you submit those images later on to a publication if you wanted to?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can. So I will probably try to do that. But I've seen, even recently, some work that was in an older show house that was featured in a current local publication. So I think the photos are yours and you can do whatever you want with them.
Awesome. Yep. Like, to me, that's worth it right there. Like, to have professional photography of work you love that you didn't really have to compromise because the homeowner didn't want A, B, or C. And you can use that and leverage that, not just on your Instagram, put it on your website, pitch it to publications, and have, your involvement with the show house really will help to elevate your marketing. So I think that as much as you say you don't directly get clients from it, I think that it is a longer term play.
Yes, absolutely. Longer term play is exactly the right way to say it. And that to have it be your own, I mean, it's such a weird, I have this like weird relationship with it that you can express yourself pretty much without limits. And you are the one who really determines what your budget is. So whether that's your marketing, you earmark that money for your marketing budget or whatever, like you really have a lot that you can do and say. And then you have this beautiful photography for your portfolio. It's true. It's pretty great.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned with even magazine features. It's pretty rare someone opens up a magazine, they're like, I want to hire this designer because I like this space.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
It's like they come to you a couple of years later or later that year and they're like, oh, well, so-and-so told me about you, or I saw you in this thing, but I also saw and really liked the thing you did for that magazine. And I see on your website, it seems to be, it's a combination of touch points, right?
Yeah. And I think, I don't know where I heard this, but I think your client has to see you 20 times, see your work or see your name 20 times before they make the call or whatever. So it just adds to that.
Okay. So what would you say are the best parts, but also the worst parts of designing for a show house?
I would say the best part is that high that you get, or at least I get, from creating something beautiful that you love. Nothing can really beat that feeling. It's fantastic. And just getting to know the people, sometimes working as a designer, if you're not in a big firm, it's a little lonely. So you do get to make a lot of friends and those conversations with people that maybe wouldn't normally hang out with all these designers all day long, but you get that camaraderie there. The hardest part, I would say, scheduling vendors around, scheduling all those subs and everything in an old mansion where 28 other design firms are trying to do the same thing. It's very, you're trying to manage everybody and keep everybody happy. It's tough.
Right.
I don't like that. I don't like if, not that my subs were unhappy, nothing like that, but you want to keep everybody happy. And then just the exposure to, you kind of have to have a little bit of a thick skin. People are walking through comparing your work to everybody else's, and that, I'm okay with it now. But at first I was like, it's rude, like it's weird. It's just a weird experience. So, but I also think if some people don't like your work, that means you're actually making some kind of a statement. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. It's funny. I would not have thought of that. Like, it's really great. I'm glad you shared that because I don't think of that. I like, it's so true. That would be really hard to see people comparing because there's all these other designers.
Yeah.
And it's not always that, they don't like the green wall. Okay, fine, whatever. Green's not for everyone. It's like, that other designer is getting so much more praise. But I like that you just said that because the reality is, how do I say this without like being mean about it? But like the average person doesn't really always value high design, right? The average homeowner wants basic crate and barrel, and some designers love to do that look, but then some designers try to really elevate it and push it and mix materials and texture and color. And that's not really for the masses. There is a small market probably for a very unique architectural digest. I use that just because it seems to qualify a designer. But it's funny, there's a designer who I've met and become sort of friends with here in the city. And he actually came from New York. And his designs to me are like, whoa, like next level, amazing. And he's been featured in all these magazines. And I showed his design. I was like, we met this guy at the ski club. He's super cool. He's amazing. And I showed it to my friends that are not designers. And I was like, look, this is like his, like, check out his house or his farmhouse.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, oh my God, it's awful. Like literally said that it was awful. And I thought, oh my God, you're right. Like, and like it hit me in that moment that he can't appreciate it because that's not, I don't know. I'm trying to be nice about it, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And, what I always say, because inevitably I will have people say to me like, oh, that room was terrible. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look, there's something for everyone. Everybody is different. There's a style for everyone. Everybody worked really, really hard. I can walk through and appreciate, even if something isn't I don't gravitate towards it stylistically, I can appreciate, okay, for this, they did this well. I get what they're trying to do, but not everybody. Yeah. It's almost spectacle to walk through and like see all this stuff. And I think you're right. The average person maybe wouldn't walk through and take the time to look at every little thing and say, wow, that probably took them a long time to do that. And a real artist put that together or something. It's interesting. You are putting yourself out there in a way that is much more, it's different if you put it on Instagram or you post it on your portfolio or whatever. You don't hear the feedback, but when you hear it in real time, it's a little bit jarring. but I really do feel like I'm okay with it. Like I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Well, let's be honest. The designers listening to this podcast, you and I, like we have sophisticated tastes. We do this for a living. We are seeing it all day, every day, constantly, always trying to up the ante and be better,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The average person who works a job that is completely unrelated to a creative industry, they don't know the differences in the trim. They don't understand the wallpaper. They don't understand those things because that's not their realm and that's not their area. So we've got to cut the average person a bit of slack.
Yes, right. We're expecting too much.
We expect too much. Can't you see that? Oh my gosh. I sweat over that. Oh, and that, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example, like the detail in the ceiling and the wallpaper and I don't know, right? And the average person's like, oh, it's kind of bold, or, oh, that's a weird,
Like that.
why would you do that fabric? Like, oh, it looks like Granny's room, or whatever they might say.
I love when they come through and they say things like, this is just not realistic.
So yes, tell us, what are some of the things people say?
I've heard everything, but you also hear wonderful things too. You hear the room that I did the first time around, I did like a tween girl's bedroom, and my daughter had a hand in all of that. And it was super colorful, like all the colors. And I would have people walk in and say, wow, I don't understand why I feel so relaxed in this room, but I do. Like, I don't and I knew why, because we know all the color theory and all of that, but there's the negative, but there is so much positive too. So that's cool. But some of the weirder things people say is they don't like the colors. I don't like birds. I don't like flowers. Why would you put this color on the floor? It's not practical. What about is it going to chip? Is this a fire hazard? All these things. That's the other thing too, is like, do you go over the top with your design, or do you try to make it look more livable to try to attract that client or whatever? So I don't know. There's a lot.
That's interesting.
Show house can be what you make it.
So cool.
That experience is to create what you want out of it.
Yeah. And I think whatever you do, whether you want to make it, like you say, more approachable, so that this is really what I would do for a client, or here's what I'm capable of, just knowing that what you're putting out there is going to attract. It's all about attracting that client, right? What you do and how you show up and the designs that you do will attract a certain clientele. And so you need to be clear on who you want.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So cool. Okay. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to tell everyone listening, because I think I forgot to mention the episode number, but Jennifer was in a panel with me and 2 other Designers Room members where we talked about High Point Market and our takeaways, because you and I got to actually hang out in person at High Point in the fall, which was amazing. We'll do it again. So that episode, if anyone's listening wants to hear more from Jennifer, it is episode 131. And I think it was called High Point Market, Is It Worth It? So if you are considering High Point Market, maybe for the fall, because this will come out after the spring market, I think it's done now, then you guys can check that episode out with Jennifer. But a last nugget of wisdom.
I would say if you're considering doing a show house, I would take the time to get really clear on what you want out of it, and consider not just the actual money that you're putting into it, but the time away from billable hours that you're putting into it. I would say get comfortable with it being a marketing expense, but also in this case, in most cases, it is a donation. You are donating to a charity. So in most cases, so just take the time, think it all through. If you want to sit it out, that's okay too.
I love that. It's so cool. So what can people do to find show houses in their area? Just like a Google search?
Yeah, I would do a quick Google search. And because I do think that spring and summer, this is like show house season, because a lot of people want to include the landscape design. I know there are tons going on. Look on Instagram too, because you follow designers and you like design, and those designers are participating in show houses, they're going to post about that.
One question I didn't ask actually just came to mind is, what is a typical turnaround from the time they say, okay, we want you to do a room? When does it have to be finished? Like, what is that lead time?
This one in particular, the lead time is actual working time in the space is November to mid-April, and then it opens May 1st. So you have a pretty good chunk of time.
That's 6 months. I was just counting on my fingers. I'm like, that's 6 months. If you are designed and ready to go, that's doable. If you have a good process, nice little plug there. Thank you very much. For those who are listening, Jennifer is clearly a POP alum.
Yes.
Yeah, you do need to have a process because otherwise it probably could feel pretty chaotic.
Yes, exactly. And the size of the room.
Right. Yeah, of course. Oh my goodness. Okay. This has been really insightful and interesting. It was actually another designer's room member who told me, you need to interview Jennifer. I want to know about this whole show house thing. Okay. I think it was Jocelyn. She was like, sent me a WhatsApp. She was like, can you please interview her for the podcast? I'm like, absolutely. This is a great idea. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Again, can you let all of our listeners know where they can find and follow you?
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram at JM_interiors or my website, Jennifer Muirhead Interiors.
Amazing. Thank you so much, lady.
Thank you. Have a good one.
How was that? Guys, I had no idea. This whole world of show houses is so cool. I totally wish they had that in Canada. I don't think, unfortunately, that it's done the same way. Mind you, if anyone's listening to this and they're in Ontario, specifically in Canada, and you're like, yeah, Rebecca, this exists, then can you please hit me up in my DMs? Because I would love to just do a bathroom or a living room. The show houses that I've seen done here in Toronto anyhow are like one celebrity designer does the entire house, which, well, first of all, you need to be a celebrity, but then second of all, that's a huge undertaking. So I really enjoyed hearing about how, you just pitch one room. And I loved Jennifer's experience that she pitched one room, the smallest room, the powder room or the bathroom, and they asked her to do an even bigger room, which is really kind of neat. It's also really great to see that that's just another opportunity to get in and establish yourself in a brand new community if you are moving to a new city. We've talked about moving to new cities before on the podcast, and I always think it's a great conversation to have because so many of us are making change and making big moves in our lives. Anyhow, let me know how you enjoyed that episode. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes. 5 stars is always welcome so that we can get more people listening to this podcast. As always, you can find me on Instagram or inside the Designer Meetups Facebook group. So drop us a line, let us know what you're loving about the podcast. And really, what else do you want me to talk about? Who do you want me to interview? Okay, that's it. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.